The number one thing that we want to first do in this course today is make sure that you are familiar with all the components of a baitcast reel. So we're going to go ahead and switch over to the GoPro, and I'm going to break down every single component on this reel and the best way to tune them. Then we'll go into the casting. All right, guys, so as you can see, I have a few different bait cast options. These are all options that I would recommend at different stages and levels depending on where you are with the baitcaster and how much you intend to use one. Starting from right to left, I'm going to go ahead and give you guys these options as we go through this video. We're going to go ahead with the Abu Garcia Black X or Max X combo. This right here is a very budget-friendly combo. We're going to start with this one because this one is the one that I recommend most. It's very, very good for beginners. Abu Garcia really did their big one when it came to finding something that would be beginner friendly and still very, very affordable, and not to mention durable. I've had this thing for close to 3 years with no issues, and I always recommend them to beginner baitcast users. We're going to go over all the components in detail. Each baitcaster reel has a different setup. Even if it's exactly the same, the layout could be different, or some of them can have different brake settings or even different tension settings and drag settings. So we're going to go one by one throughout these 4 rods, and I'm going to show you each of those in great detail so you guys can get an idea of what each of these reels is capable of doing. Starting first with your release. The release is as clear as it can be. It's literally your release button. That's the button right here that you push to get your line to go out, just like that. Next up, we're going to go ahead and go to the drag. That's going to be the little star thing that's on the side. They're always different. Sometimes they'll be shorter or longer. Sometimes they can have little round edges, but more or less your drag's always going to be on the same side as your handle, 100%. The drag is what helps you fight the fish. If you have the drag tight down, there's going to be full tension on this line. That means when the fish goes to try to pull out some line, he can't get any slack. Usually that results in snapping line or bent hooks and you losing the fish. So you always want to keep your drag at a comfortable spot for you. I recommend doing it to where it's not too tight and it's not too loose, right about there to where you can move it with just a little bit of pressure of your finger. Very easy, very simple. The drag is what's going to help you fight that fish and avoid you having your line break, your hook bend, or you losing the fish. If you see now when I go to pull this drag, I'm getting drag. If you click the button, you'll see I have release, but now this reel is completely locked. Nothing can pull out this line but the drag or the fish fighting it. So there you go. That is the drag right there. That is what's going to allow you to have that fish take some runs and safely relieve tension off your line, but still keep enough pressure on the fish to where he can't get off the hook. That is more or less what your drag does. Next up, we're going to go over here to the other side and we're going to talk about brakes. I'm going to save the tension knob for last because that's the most important part of a baitcast reel. So we're going to go ahead and jump over to brakes. When you're first starting out, brakes help you with 2 things. They help you control your casting distance, and they also help you control the speed at which your spool is spinning. So basically what it does is, when I go to cast this thing, if my brakes are set halfway, for example, let's go ahead and set them halfway. With me setting this at halfway, what this is going to do, whenever I go to cast, when I'm halfway through my cast, the brakes are going to start to engage and slow that bait down before it hits the water to avoid overspooling, or what you guys call a backlash or a bird's nest. That is what the brakes do. That is exactly what they're there for. They're a very helpful tool to help you not get overspooled. Once you mess with this tension knob, this spool is loose as a goose. Once you loosen this tension knob, this spool is freely to move wherever it wants. The brakes is the only thing you have besides your thumb that can control if you're going to get a backlash or not when that bait hits the water. Basically, it's inertia. So I decided to pause the video right here to explain what I mean by inertia. Inertia is an object's resistance to change in motion. Basically meaning that if something is going fast enough, it's going to be hard for that to stop and change direction or slow down. To give you a good example of this, picture a car going 100 miles an hour at a brick wall. If you step on the brakes 100 feet from that wall, you're still going to slam into that wall. You didn't have enough time to slow down. Now, if you were to slam on those brakes at about 300 feet, you would have more than enough time to slow down and avoid that crash. In this scenario, the bait is the car and the water is the wall. And of course, the brakes are the brakes. If the brakes have enough time to stop the bait before it hits the water, it'll gently land in the water. If it doesn't, it's going to aggressively hit the water and that spool's going to continuously spin. That's what causes overlappings and backlashes or bird's nest. With all that said, that's why having your brakes set correctly is very important whenever you're using a baitcaster. Okay, enough science. Time to get back to the video. That is the best way I can explain it, and that's how it was explained to me. I promise you guys, that is the #1 tool right there on helping you avoid backlashes, your brakes, besides your thumb. Next up, of course, we got the tension. So the tension knob basically controls the tension of the spool. It controls how freely that spool is going to move. More tension, if you tighten it down, means that spool is barely gonna move. It is barely gonna move. As you can see, the more you tighten it down, it's gonna lock that spool down to where that spool can barely move. Keep on tightening it down just to show you guys this. I'm gonna tighten it down as tight as I can. And even with the release press, that is not coming out unless I pull it. That tension locked all the way down is gonna make this spool dang near not move. You see there's a little bit of play. Now on the other side of things, if you take the spool and you loosen that tension, I'm gonna hold the spool while I do this. You loosen that tension by turning it back towards you. Start to freely spool, just like that. And that's where the backlashes come in. Whenever that tension is too loose and the spool is moving too freely, it bunches up the line. I'll go ahead and show you guys what happens if you have your tension all the way loose. Pretty much to where the cap's almost coming off, because guys, this does come off. But there we go. That's as loose as you can get this, okay? I think I got a 3-ounce jig head on here. So let's go ahead and click this release and see what happens whenever you have that tension way too loose. You see that? That is caused due to your spool being way too free. Look at that. See how that just goes back and forth? It has nothing to stop it. See all that bunching? That's what happens. That's when you get a big backlash or a bird's nest. So with that said, the first thing you want to do when you get your baitcaster all lined up and spooled up, you want to push that tension knob away from you towards the tip of the pole. It would help if I engaged. That helps keep the spool more still. There we go. We're gonna tighten that tension down. Let me get this little backlash out really quick. Now that I've tightened that tension, just like this, when I click, nothing's happening. You let the weight of the bait slowly pull on the spool. The more tension you add, the less the bait's gonna fall. The less tension you add, the more the bait's gonna fall. So again, I'm gonna show you guys that again. Click that, boom. That bait's slowly coming down. That's a little too slow. So let's go ahead and tune that tension again. We're gonna go back up with the bait. We're gonna back it off towards us, make it a little bit more loose. There we go, got some speed there. Boom, hits the ground. Slight overlap, but nothing too serious. I would still, if I was a beginner, tighten that up just a tad bit, and right there. Now this should be perfect. This should be perfect to cast it. Let's see here. And a little bit too. There we go. There's a sweet spot. So basically what I'm doing here is what's called tuning your baitcaster. You're tuning your tension in tune with your brakes, which are set to halfway, to make sure you can get a great cast without having overspooling. Nobody wants to pull up to a fishing spot, grab a baitcaster for the first time, cast it out, and continuously be fighting backlash when the fish are biting or jumping. That is the worst feeling in the world. That's why a lot of people stray away from baitcast reels, because they feel like they're too complicated or not worth the trouble. This is one thing that people have mixed emotions about. Is it really worth using a baitcaster? In my opinion, yes, 100%. I've used the baitcaster for close to 16 years, and they have helped me fight so many fish that I never would have caught if I was using a push button reel or a spinning rod. That's just how it is. That's just, it's a very, very good tool when utilized properly. So with that said, now that we got that tension set a little bit better, we got a good fall rate. That's still a little bit slower than I like, so I'm gonna tune that back a little bit. We got our brake set at halfway. There we go. We got our brakes set at halfway, so diagonal to that Abu Garcia logo right there. Then we got our drag set to halfway, to where you can just push it barely with your finger, just like that, and it moves. That's good for fighting a fish. You can always add more or less while you're fighting the fish, just like this. If you're fighting a fish, we're fighting a fish. He's on, boys, he's on. You can literally add more or less. If he's gaining too much ground on you, taking too much line, add more. If he's not taking enough line and there's too much tension and you feel like it's about to snap, you can add less drag. So I like to keep mine right in the middle when I start fishing, and then you can change and dial that while you're fighting the fish. So now that we've got this set up, we got the fall rate right where we want it. We're going to go ahead and give this the cast. Now this is with braided line. Braided line is a lot easier to use on a baitcaster than monofilament or fluorocarbon. I do have a monofilament setup, and it has a really, really light setup on it. So I'm gonna show you guys casting that, and it's a little bit of wind out here, so you guys will get to see the full effect of casting a light bait with the baitcaster. That's not BFS, that's not bait finesse, that's not a light casting system. This is just a regular baitcaster casting a very, very light setup in wind with no backlash and no bird's nest. That's what you'll see here in a second. That's going to be the next one that I'll show you guys. So with all that said, now that we've got our drag set to halfway, our tension set right where we want it, that slow fall, and we got our brake set to halfway, we're going to go ahead and give it our first cast. Now, as you can see, I'm at home right now, so I'm in my backyard. There's a fence right there. I'm gonna try to cast over that fence, not against it, over it. Good thing about baitcasters is they're very, very accurate. That's another reason to use one. Not to mention they're very, very strong and good at pulling out of heavy cover. That's another reason to use one. They are a very, very beneficial tool that I highly recommend to everybody, and that's why I'm doing this tutorial for you guys. I didn't have anybody to really show me this. I was told once, and then my dad said, now you try. And this is what I've learned over my 16 years. So with all that said, we're gonna give it a cast. And when it comes to your casting, guys, you're gonna click that release. Hold your thumb on your spool so it doesn't go freely. Whenever you go like this, boom, whenever you get right there, when you get right here in front of you, where the bait is right above your head, where the tip of that pole and that bait is right above your head, that's when you wanna release. That's if you're doing an overhand cast. We'll go over the other tricks and casts that I have for you guys here in a second, but I wanna show you guys just a regular overhead cast, which you would go straight to the bank and do. So here we go. First overhead cast, I got a little bit of line out. That way that bait has good momentum. Here we go. There we go, no backlash. I tuned that correctly, I tuned it perfectly. Just like that, there's not a backlash in there. Let's see if I can get my jig back without getting caught in the fence. There we go, I got her back, boys. Almost hooked the bird, but that's okay. So we're gonna give that another cast. This time I'll do it a little bit harder. Just a little bit harder, just to kind of show you guys how it would be, because a lot of people just want to whip it out there in the middle of the lake as hard as they can. So I'm gonna give it a little bit harder cast, and then we'll do even harder after this. There you go. Again, that was a harder cast. No backlash in the spool. That's what you want to see. So let's go ahead and get our jig back over here. Hopefully we won't get stuck in the fence. Let's go ahead and slowly, there we go. Oh, stuck on a little piece of plant. There we go. All right, guys. Again, sorry for the lawnmower noise. It's a very pretty day, so a lot of people's cutting their yards. And I wanted to do this at home so I can show you guys everything I need without people bothering me or walking by and being all loud and stuff. So here we go. Now, I'm gonna cast this almost as hard as I can. And I wanna see if we get a backlash, because the amount of force of your cast has a lot to do with bird's nest and backlash. So now I'm really gonna whip this thing. So here we go. Let's go ahead and whip this almost as hard as we can without breaking anything or hitting a window. Here we go, boys. Look at that. And that was with me whipping it. You heard the reel. Ying! One of the best sounds in the world. You heard the reel. That's with me whipping it extremely hard with the 3/8 ounce jig head. Just like that. And that's why I recommend this setup, because it is very, very good at avoiding that. Now, with all that said, this is with braided line. Braided line has a tendency to be more forgiving whenever it comes to whether or not you're gonna get a backlash. Now we're gonna switch to a lighter bait, same style of Baitcaster, but we're gonna have a lighter bait on there. It's windy out here, so it's gonna already make it harder to cast. When you're using a Baitcaster, wind is not your friend unless you cast with the wind. Not only that, but it is monofilament instead of braid. Braid is just a lot more forgiving on a Baitcaster, so let's grab that. All right, guys, and that's it. That's the tutorial for you. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was helpful. I hope it's something you can go back to and watch over and over again. Thank you guys again so much. I know I keep saying thank you, but I'm just so grateful to be in this position. Tight lines. I will see you guys in the next one.